7 months ago, this engagement looked like a fresh chapter. Today, it's already becoming a closed one. According to publicly available court documents, actress Jaime King and banker Austin Sosa are heading toward divorce, after what appears to have been a very private wedding that was never publicly announced. So what really happened between the engagement announcement, the quiet marriage, and this sudden legal filing? And why does this story feel so different from the typical Hollywood relationship timeline? Let's walk through the full timeline, step by step. In July 2025, Jaime King's representative confirmed that she was engaged to Austin Sosa. At the time, the announcement was framed as a positive milestone in her personal life. Her representative shared that Jaime was grateful for the support from fans, and especially happy to share this moment with her children, emphasizing that her sons remained her top priority. Sources also mentioned that she had developed a close relationship with Austin's family and had even stayed with his parents after moving out of her Los Angeles apartment earlier that year. On a podcast later that year, Jaime briefly mentioned that she and Austin met through mutual friends, suggesting that their relationship grew naturally, outside of Hollywood's usual spotlight. At that point, the story felt like a calm, grounded romance, far from the usual celebrity headlines. But that's where the timeline starts to get interesting. Here's where things become less clear. While the engagement was confirmed publicly, it remains unclear exactly when Jaime King and Austin Sosa officially got married. There were no big announcements, no widely reported ceremony details, and no public celebration coverage. This kind of private approach isn't unheard of in Hollywood, but it does stand out, especially for someone with a long public career like Jaime King. The lack of public documentation suggests the couple may have intentionally chosen a low-profile path, possibly prioritizing privacy over publicity. But just months later, that private chapter took a sudden turn. According to court documents obtained by People, Austin Sosa filed for divorce on January 22nd. TMZ was the first to report the filing, and People later confirmed the details through publicly available records. This means the marriage appears to have lasted only a short period, possibly just a few months after the engagement announcement. In celebrity timelines, relationships can move fast, but a divorce so soon after a quiet wedding naturally sparks curiosity. What changed? Was the relationship moving too quickly, or were there personal circumstances behind the scenes that the public never saw? At this stage, no detailed public statements have been released from either side, and People reached out to Jaime King's representative for comment. So for now, much of what happened remains private, just as the couple may have intended from the beginning. To understand why this new relationship drew so much attention, it helps to look at Jaime King's past. She was previously married to filmmaker Kyle Newman. The couple tied the knot in 2007 and were together for over a decade. In May 2020, Jaime filed for divorce, and their separation became official in September 2023. For many fans, that marriage represented a long and stable chapter in her life. So when she announced a new engagement in 2025, it felt like the start of a completely new era. But the legal side of her past relationship was still unfolding. In March 2025, a judge granted Kyle Newman sole physical custody of their sons. While Jaime and Kyle share legal custody, Newman was given tie-breaking authority over legal decisions, according to court documents. This is an important detail because it adds context to where Jaime was emotionally and practically during the time she became engaged to Austin Sosa. Publicly, her representative emphasized that her children remained her top priority and that she was focused on moving forward with love and gratitude. For many people, entering a new relationship during such a complex family transition can be both hopeful and challenging at the same time. And that context makes the timing of her engagement and marriage even more intriguing. From the outside, the timeline appears fast-paced. Engagement confirmed in mid-2025, a private wedding at some point afterward, and a divorce filing just months later in early 2026. In Hollywood, quick engagements and private ceremonies aren't unusual, but short-lived marriages still tend to raise questions. Was it a whirlwind romance that didn't work out? Or did the couple realize early on that their priorities and lifestyles didn't align? Without direct statements, the public only has pieces of the puzzle. But the way this story unfolded, mostly quietly, with minimal publicity, suggests that both parties may have wanted to keep their personal lives away from the spotlight. Many celebrity relationships play out very publicly with social media posts, interviews, and red carpet appearances. In contrast, this relationship was largely low-key. The engagement was confirmed through a representative. The marriage wasn't publicly detailed, and the divorce filing came through legal records rather than a public announcement. That creates a different kind of narrative, one that feels more private, more controlled, and less driven by headlines. For fans, this can be surprising, especially when someone has been in the public eye for decades. It also highlights how public figures can choose very different approaches to sharing their personal lives. Here's what's confirmed through publicly available information. Austin Sosa filed for divorce on January 22nd. The engagement was confirmed in July 2025. The exact wedding date hasn't been publicly disclosed. And here's what remains unknown: the specific reasons behind the divorce filing, how long the couple had been married, whether either party plans to speak publicly about the situation. This gap between public information and private reality is what keeps people curious. But it also serves as a reminder that behind every headline, there are personal stories that aren't meant for public consumption. Let's slow this down and map out the timeline in a way that makes the story clearer. First, Jaime King's long marriage officially ended in 2023. Then, in early 2025, custody arrangements were finalized, adding a major life shift. Only a few months later, in mid-2025, her engagement to Austin Sosa was confirmed. At some point after that, they appear to have quietly married, and by January 2026, the divorce paperwork had already been filed. When you put all of that together, it creates a compressed and intense period of change in just a few years. For anyone, celebrity or not, that kind of rapid transition can be overwhelming, and this is where the story becomes less about gossip and more about human timing. You might be wondering, why would a public figure keep a wedding so private? There are many reasons: privacy, family considerations, personal boundaries, or simply wanting a moment that isn't shaped by headlines. For someone who has spent decades in the public eye, choosing a quiet ceremony could be a deliberate way to protect something meaningful. But privacy can also mean that when things change, the public finds out through legal filings rather than personal announcements. And that shift from celebration to paperwork can feel abrupt and confusing to fans. One of the most fascinating parts of celebrity stories is how different the public timeline can be from the real one. Fans often see carefully curated moments, engagement announcements, interviews, brief comments. But the day-to-day reality of a relationship is almost always invisible. In this case, the engagement felt public and hopeful, while the marriage and separation happened mostly off-camera. That contrast creates a unique kind of curiosity, because the audience only sees the beginning and the end without the middle. And that missing middle is what people naturally want to understand. This story also reflects something bigger than celebrity news. Relationships today often move quickly, especially when people are balancing careers, family, and public attention. Sometimes connections feel right in the moment, but circumstances evolve. That doesn't necessarily make any chapter a failure. It simply shows how life can change direction in unexpected ways. For Jaime King, this engagement and marriage may have represented hope and a fresh start during a complex period of her life. And the divorce filing, while unexpected, is part of that ongoing personal journey. People aren't just interested because she's famous. They're interested because this timeline feels unusually fast, quiet, and mysterious. A public engagement, a private wedding, a rapid divorce filing. That sequence creates a narrative that feels unfinished, like a story with missing chapters. And whenever a story feels incomplete, audiences naturally want more context. But here's the key. Sometimes the missing chapters are meant to stay private. When a celebrity relationship ends quickly, people naturally want to understand the why. Not out of judgment, but because these stories feel like modern fairy tales with unexpected twists. An engagement, a private wedding, and a divorce filing in under a year feels like a full emotional arc compressed into headlines. But headlines rarely show the full context. They show timestamps, not emotions, conversations, or private decisions. That gap between headlines and reality is what makes stories like this trend across social platforms. It's easy to forget that behind every celebrity update are real people navigating real life. Jaime King is not just an actress, she's also a mother, a public figure and someone who has experienced major personal changes over the past few years. Entering a new relationship during a period of transition can feel hopeful, grounding, and exciting. And sometimes relationships evolve in ways that no one expects at the beginning. The divorce filing doesn't erase the positive moments that may have existed. It simply marks a shift in direction. Let's compare this to a typical celebrity relationship timeline: public dating phase, red carpet appearances, engagement announcements, wedding coverage, social media highlights. In this case, much of that middle phase was missing. No big public rollout, no widely shared wedding details. Just a quiet engagement confirmation and then legal documents months later. That makes the timeline feel almost like a story told in reverse. And reverse stories naturally capture attention because the audience tries to fill in the blanks. As of now, neither Jaime King nor Austin Sosa has shared detailed public statements about the divorce filing. This means the next updates, if any, will likely come through official sources or future interviews. Sometimes public figures choose silence to protect their families, especially when children are involved. And sometimes they eventually share their perspective when the timing feels right. For now, the story remains open-ended. This isn't just a celebrity news update, it's a reminder of how fast life can change. 1 year can include an engagement, a wedding, and a major life transition. It shows how people can seek new beginnings while still navigating complex realities from the past. And it highlights how public perception often lags behind real life. By the time fans hear about something, the story may already be moving into its next chapter. So the big question remains: was this a whirlwind romance that simply didn't align long-term? Or is there a deeper story that hasn't been shared publicly? Right now, there's no verified public explanation, and that's exactly why the story continues to spark curiosity. But sometimes the most important parts of a story are the ones that never make headlines. One of the most striking parts of this situation is how intentionally private everything appears to have been. In an era where many celebrities share every milestone online, this relationship moved in the opposite direction. Minimal announcements, no wedding coverage, no public statements about the separation. Just official filings and reports from reputable sources. That suggests a conscious decision to keep personal life separate from public image. And in many ways, that's becoming more common among public figures who want to regain control of their narratives. When information is limited, speculation tends to fill the gaps. But responsible reporting relies on confirmed facts and respectful language, especially when families and children are involved. This is why most coverage has focused on the timeline and publicly available court documents, rather than assumptions about motives or private conversations. And for viewers, that's an important reminder. What we see online is always just a fragment of a much larger personal story. If you zoom out, this story has a clear emotional arc, a hopeful engagement, a quiet, private wedding, a sudden legal shift. For fans, it feels like a fast-moving narrative with an unresolved ending. But for the people involved, it's likely a deeply personal chapter with complexities that don't fit neatly into headlines. This contrast between public curiosity and private reality is what makes celebrity stories feel both fascinating and incomplete. Public perception often changes with major life events. Some fans may see this as a surprising twist. Others may see it as a natural part of a long and evolving personal journey. In many cases, how someone moves forward, professionally and personally, matters far more than the details of a brief chapter. And Jaime King has spent decades building a career that extends far beyond any single relationship timeline. Right now, the public only knows the outline: engagement, quiet marriage, divorce filing. The deeper story, the conversations, decisions, and emotions, remains private. And that might be intentional. Sometimes silence is a form of boundary setting in a world that constantly demands access, which raises an interesting question. Are we seeing the beginning of a new era where celebrities keep major life events off social media entirely? This story isn't just about a quick engagement and an even quicker divorce filing. It's about how modern celebrity relationships are changing, moving away from public spectacle and toward quiet, controlled privacy. But this isn't the only recent case where a high-profile relationship unfolded almost entirely behind closed doors. There are other celebrity couples who kept engagements, weddings, and even breakups completely out of the spotlight, and their timelines are even more surprising. If you want to stay updated with stories like this, you can subscribe for more in-depth timelines, context, and responsible reporting on celebrity news and culture.